For my thesis, I did a habitat assessment of the Shoal Creek Ranger District of the Talladega National Forest for black bear. So let's get right on into it. A little bit about the American black bear. It's the most abundant bear in the world. There's approximately 900,000 black bears in the United States. There are known populations in 40 out of 50 states. And bears are mostly limited to mature forest with low human densities, low human disturbance. All right, but they are known to coexist with humans whenever there are very few numbers. It's very fragmented. The highest densities of black bear are in the southeast, are in East Tennessee, North Carolina, East Kentucky, and West Virginia. As you see, Alabama is not on there, so our densities are rather low. In Alabama, though, our population is predominantly located in the southernmost region in the Mobile area. All right, in South Alabama, the black bear population likely migrated north from Florida, so it's Ursus americanus floridus. And in northeast Alabama, it's just Ursus americana. More than likely, the bears that are here have migrated southwest from the Blue Ridge and Smoky Mountains. A little bit about black bears in Alabama. A long time ago, before settlement came down to Alabama, there were a large number of black bears. Today, as we know, there's not very many around. What happened to them? All right, extirpation. Basically what it was brought on by the early American settlers with their agricultural practices. They came in, they cleared out all the land, they cleared out forests for agriculture. This wiped out the habitats. And then bears ended up competing with humans for habitat resources. Bears became known as pests. They started eating the farmland, the crops. So they started shooting them, killing them. You know, on top of already hunting them, they became poached, and it resulted in the extirpation of black bears from northeast Alabama and Alabama as a whole. Only recently, in the past couple of decades, have they begun moving back into Alabama, and we will continue. This is the bear population in 1997. All right, this photo was given to us courtesy of Mr. Keith Galden. He works for the state of Alabama Wildlife. As you can see, in 1997, the population in Alabama was limited to the Mobile area. There's none in the northeast, and as you all can see, courtesy is misspelled. I apologize. So, a little bit before we dive into it, I was fortunate enough to complete an internship with the Arizona Game and Fish this past summer. We were doing vegetation and capture-recapture studies for American black bear in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest. I got to work with Mr. Kirby Bristow. And with our capture-recapture methods, what we did was we actually physically caught the bears using state trap stations. They consisted of basically a 5-gallon bucket that had a steel cable wrapped around the opening of it. Put some fruit and stuff in there that the bears like, fruit, fish. The bears would reach in this bucket, and it had a hook and trigger in there, and whenever the bear reached in there to get its reward, the cable tied around its wrist, it pulled the cable, it had a spring lock on the hook, so the cable would actually wrap around its wrist. The bear couldn't go anywhere. We would come up within the next couple of hours, shoot it with a dart, tag it, put a radio collar on it, and let him go. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do anything like that around here. A, it's way too expensive, and B, we don't have that many bears. A little bit of outline of where I was. Springerville was where we were stationed out of. This is the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest. 98% of our studies were right here on the state line between Arizona and New Mexico. It's amazing too, because you think of Arizona, you think hot, dry, desert climate. Actually, in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest, you have elevations of 8, 9, 10, 11,000 feet, and it's really awesome. It's a lot of aspen, Douglas fir, spruce fir, higher elevations. Just not your typical, what everybody pictures Arizona as. But it was an awesome experience. It's kind of a view of what we looked at, what we got to see every day from the top of our mountain that we did most of our studies on. It was called Escadilla. At the base of the mountain, your elevation was about 6,000 feet. At the summit, you were at 11,500 feet. So it's quite an elevation change. But this was this was at the very top of the mountain. It was a bowl, actually. It ran about 2 miles in a diameter at the top of this mountain, and the bears actually frequently visited it. But it was beautiful. And this is kind of what the forest looked like 3 years ago. Unfortunately, 2 summers ago, there was a really bad wildfire called the Rodeo Tedesco wildfire, and it burned up 95% of the forest in that area. So this is what it looked like afterwards. Completely scorched. Very few places were able to withstand the fire. They were able to control it in some of the areas. The fire actually came from non-management. The residents that lived in the area, they didn't want the forest to be managed, thinned, and the state of Arizona had been pushing and pushing for years. You know, we need to thin this forest out for habitat, for safety, and the residents they wouldn't have it. So eventually enough fuel built up within the forest that a small wildfire broke out. Some campers left they didn't completely put out their campfire. Come back 3 hours later, there was about 2 or 3 miles already on fire. And with the climate like it is out there, there's no humidity, very little rainfall, and that it's just like gasoline. And within a matter of 2 weeks, the entire forest was burned up. Nothing they could do about it. This is one of our live bears that I actually got to capture. As you can see, he's not very big, but it was really cool to actually have a hands-on experience with capturing a bear. This was our bucket snares, and you can see the cable there that he's attached to. It's wrapped around his paw. It's a really good way to study bears, but it's also kind of saddening whenever you come up on a live bear and he's caught in one of these traps, because he takes off running full sprint and he forgets that he's tied to a cable, and it turns him a couple of flips. But it's okay. They never got hurt. There's a face-up view of him. Again, there's a bucket snare. You can see the spring right here. This spring is actually held down by a little hook in the front of the bucket, and then there's a hook actually inside the bucket. Whenever he reaches his hand inside, it triggers that spring. The steel cable is draped over the top of that spring, and that's what pulls it tight on his wrist. Good grip and grin picture. As you can see, he wasn't very big, but still, it was hands-on. It was fun. It was an amazing experience. You can see the opening of the bucket snare right there. What it is bears are actually really smart. They had gotten to where they would outsmart you. If you didn't have this wire and everything on the front of the bucket, they could just reach in there, take the fruit off the hook, and never get caught. So we had to devise this little, gateway system hole right there where it was just big enough for them to fit their paw in there and go straight into the hook and trip them here, and trip the wire, and then snag them. And they still, at a lot of times, were able to evade getting caught like that too. So. Enough of my internship, back to the studies. The anatomy of a black bear. Bears are plantigrade, meaning they walk on the heels and toes of their feet. Each foot has 5 toes and 5 claws. They have sturdy and heavy limbs. This assists them in rolling rocks, tearing open logs, and unearthing ground nests in search for food. A limiting factor of these heavy limbs is they inhibit long-distance pursuit of their prey. So we'll get into the feeding later, but black bears aren't really, they're known as opportunistic feeders and carnivores, but you're not going to see a black bear chasing after a squirrel or a coyote. A, they're too slow, and B, they don't have the endurance. An adult male can weigh anywhere from 80 to 227 kilograms, and females can weigh anywhere from 45 to 136 kilograms. When they're standing on all fours, they can average anywhere from 0.6 to 0.9 meters tall, and whenever they're standing erect, they average about 1.5 meters. One way to tell if you're looking at an American black bear is their nose. They're going to have a long pointed muzzle, and it's going to be dark brown or light tan. Occasionally you'll have them where they don't have the colored muzzle, but we haven't seen any around here. When I was in Arizona, we actually did have a lot of black bear species. We called them cinnamon bears. They looked exactly like a grizzly bear in color and posture. They were just half the size. Habitat, black bears, they inhabit a wide range of habitat conditions. It just depends on what's available at the time of where they are and where they're at in their lifetime. The variations of habitat in the Appalachian Mountains are due to their differences in climate, food, and the topography of where they are. It's also influenced by humans. Humans have a large effect on black bears and their population. They tend to steer clear of humans. They like to be left alone. But we've also seen where if there are large bear populations that they can coexist. And whenever there are large populations, they tend to get in your trash and break in cars. They've been known to do that, come into tents. We've had a few episodes this summer of campers actually getting mauled by a bear in their tent while they were asleep because they had left food inside their tent. So if you're ever camping in the Smokies, make sure you keep your food locked up in a Loctite bin, preferably inside the trunk of your car. Don't take it in your tent because they'll come after you. The basic habitat is composed of plenty of escape cover. All right, as I said, in small populations, so they like to have room to escape wherever they are. Low human interference, hardwood forests. The reason they like hardwood forests is a lot of oak species. This provides their hard mass for their food during the fall and winter time. The soft mass availability, that's going to be your berry plant species. Blueberries, blackberries, huckleberries, elderberries. That all consists of the soft mass, and as long as you have a good mixture of hard and soft mass, you're going to have the potential for black bears in your area. Home range. The black bear home range is determined by their habitat type, like we were just talking about. If there's an ample amount of food, ample amount of resources for them to live, it will greatly influence it. The sex of the bear. Males and females have very different home ranges. Females, they tend to have extremely small home ranges. Due to part of whenever they have cubs, they don't like to carry them around in a lot of places. B, they're not really looking, females aren't the active predator, I guess you could say, in reproduction. They rely on the males to come to them. So on the other hand, your males, they have extremely large home ranges. They're kind of wanderers. They're always on search. They're always on the lookout for females to reproduce. Food availability, habitat, anything like that. They could find the perfect habitat with ample amount of food, ample escape cover, and they still just wander around. Very few times will you see a male who stays in the same area for long periods of time. The age of the bears also affects their home range. Just as in humans, as bears get older, they tend to not want to run around as much and just kind of hang out. Seasons. In the south, we have very mild winters, hot summers. As the further north you get, we all know the winters get colder. So bears, they can stand the cold. They hibernate, but they prefer to have the mild winters. So they come down south. That's why you see today your most populations in southeast or in South Alabama, South Georgia, and Florida. Environmental conditions, that kind of falls under the seasons, the climates as well. Your food availability has a great impact on your home range. If there's plenty of food, then typically they're not going to want to wander around unless they're a male. Males are going to wander around regardless. And population densities. There's a large population of black bear. They know they're going to be safe. There's obviously ample amount of cover. There's ample choice for reproduction. So it makes them stay. Moving in the home range, like I said, is primarily due to meeting habitat needs and mating. Male home range is generally 3 to 8 times larger than females. And the home ranges tend to increase during the summer times whenever they feed on mostly soft mass. Reason being is the soft mass species of fruits are higher in energy levels. They give the bears higher energy levels. So as we all know, whenever you have higher energy, that's going to make you want to do more things. Same as in the bear. Have higher energy, they tend to move around a lot more. And they're most active at night. In the daytime, they usually found bedded down somewhere, so nocturnal. Reproduction. Female bears, they begin reproducing from ages 3 to 5, and in a quality habitat, they can begin reproducing as early as the age of 2. Limited availability of soft and hard mass from previous years can also have an effect on their litter size. All right, if there's plenty of mass selection in previous years, then they will have enough fat and energy stored up to carry out a full pregnancy. If they're not, I guess, quote unquote, healthy enough to have a pregnancy to carry out the full term, the pregnancies will be terminated. Reproduction occurs during the summer months, and the egg implantation happens approximately 5 months after mating. All right, this happens because of the limited availability of soft and hard mass. Like I was saying, there's a limited availability. Most of the times, if the pregnancy comes through, it decreases the litter size, or if they're not healthy enough, then their bodies just terminate the pregnancy altogether. If they are healthy enough to reproduce and have healthy cubs, 5 months after the mating, the eggs will fertilize, and 2 months later, the cubs are born in the winter. Cubs are most commonly born as twins, and litters can range from 1 cub to 5 total. Diet. Like I was saying earlier, bears are considered as carnivores, but they're not active predators. They're opportunistic feeders. An opportunistic feeder is basically feeds on whatever's available at that given time. So black bears, they're known to eat roots, bugs, berries, bark, basically whatever they can ingest and use as a food source, they're going to eat it. Bears have simple stomachs with no cecum, so this means they have a really hard time digesting certain foods, especially plant foods. So whenever they eat continuously, nonstop. Basically, a bear's lifestyle, so they eat, use a bathroom, sleep, and do it all over again. That's their life. During the spring, early spring, food is scarce, and they feed on residual hard mass, which is mostly acorns and bark that's left over. How that happened. Acorns and bark that's left over from the previous fall. This summer, their diets consist of soft mass species. These are when the berry plants, your blackberries, huckleberries, all of your vaccinium species are in full bloom and producing soft mass. And then during the fall, their diets change back to the hard mass species. This is when your oaks are producing all of your acorns and stuff like that. So, what's going on, Richard? There we go. I knew you were coming. And in the wintertime, and like I said, in Alabama, bears don't really fully hibernate. They'll sleep for a few days, they'll get up, browse around, eat a little bit, go back to sleep. Whereas in the northern part of the United States, Canada, and extreme northern parts of the U.S. where it gets extremely cold in the winter, they'll go into hibernation about the end of November and then come out in the end of March, early April, and start feeding on the soft mass again. Black bear in Alabama, like I said earlier, the population is the largest in the Mogo River Delta, and it consists of the Florida black bear, Ursus americanus floridus. And we know that in Alabama there are less than 50 individual bears in South Alabama. The population in Northeast Alabama is likely small and fragmented. We found that out the hard way during our research. But most of the bears in our area, actually all of them, more than likely migrated down from the Smoky Mountains and the Blue Ridge Mountains in northwest Georgia. This is a map of the known and predicted ranges of bear in Alabama of 2013. Another photo of Mr. Keith Galden with the State Department. The areas in gray are where we have known we have physical evidence that bears are located. The red, see the V right here, is the predicted distribution. As long as bear populations stay healthy, bear management is underwent, and making people aware. Just because you see a bear doesn't mean you have to shoot it. Will help out a lot. But this is the predicted distribution over the next couple of years for the black bear if everything keeps going the way it is These are a list of Alabama bear sightings. They go all the way back to July 2010. There are a few in South Alabama, but for this study, it was centered around Northeast Alabama. As you can see, most of them are up around the Little River Canyon area, up above Weiss Lake. There are actually known bear populations up there. They found dens, they found cubs. Why aren't they here? We'll get into that later because it's really close, but there's a lot of reasons and implications of why they are in Little River Canyon but are scarcely populated here. This is a picture of a black bear in Dark Carter, what you tell me, Nancy's Creek?
Yeah, Nancy's Creek.
Nancy's Creek that was taken last fall. So there's our hard evidence right there. We know they're here. We've just got to find where they are and what we can do to keep bringing them in the area. So the objectives of our study: use data from previous hard and soft mass surveys to determine food availabilities throughout our study area, and then we wanted to confirm the bear presence with hair snares, photos, and recorded bear sightings. So our study area was the Shoal Creek Ranger District of the Talladega National Forest. It's in Calhoun and Cleveland counties, and it lies in the Piedmont and Ridge and Valley regions of the National Forest. Our topography varies from mesic slopes that are adjacent to small creeks and streams to steep xeric slopes and ridge tops. A little bit about our climate. Of course, in Alabama we have hot and humid summers and extremely mild winters, and we average about 145 centimeters of rainfall per year. This is our study area, the Shoal Creek Ranger District of the Talladega National Forest. The hair snare stations were located north of I-20 around the Duggar Mountain, Pinky Burns Trailhead, and Coleman Lake areas, and then the Horseblock Mountain Range goes all the way down into here. And Horseblock Mountain is where our plant surveys and hard and soft mass data was taken from. Our non-invasive research is used for species detection, individual identification, and population estimations. It's extremely useful when species occur at low densities, like they are here, and it's very inexpensive. We had, I don't even remember how much we spent, but it wasn't a lot of money. It was extremely inexpensive and very effective when there are enough bears to actually study, to undergo that study with. Non-invasive research is favorable to live trapping, basically due to there's no physical stress involved on the bears. We do this by using hair snare stations and game cameras. Our hair snare stations, they were located in Duggar Mountain at the Pinky Burns Trailhead and Coleman Lake areas. There were 10 hair snare stations at each site, and we had a total of 30 stations active at one time. We checked and rebaited the stations every 7 days, and we had 3 7-week studies that were 49 days long. So we had 210 total stations per study for a total of 630 total study stations. Study areas for Duggar Mountain. This is County Road 500. It runs through the Talladega National Forest, and as you can see, we had 5 traps located on the northern side and 5 on the southern. And the one area where we actually found bear hair was this trap right here, the absolute furthest away from any road and human activity whatsoever. Pinky Burns Trailhead, this is Rabbit Town Road. If you're familiar with the White Plains area, you go out Rabbit Town Road. The Pinky Burns Trailhead is just right off of this. We hiked back in about 2/10 of a mile, started placing our traps. And then the Coleman Lake area. And this is also, this is 500, and I want to say this is 540. And this is actually an old Forest Service road. So we parked up here, hiked in on this old grown-up forest road, and we set up 5 traps in this area as well, and 5 traps a little bit north of it. This is all of our hair snare stations. Basically what we did was we took some barbed wire, found 4 or 5 trees about 5 or 6 feet apart, wrapped the barbed wire around each one of them. All right. Then we had a rope that went through the middle of the station. We had a scent lure, which was a, I'm just going to leave it as a scent lure. We used tampons for our scent lures soaked in raspberry extract, and then we also had a bag of donuts that we used as the reward for the bears to keep them coming back. Because a lot of times we know with previous research, if a bear finds a reward, he's going to come back. Just like kids in the cookie jar. They know the cookies are there, they're going to come back. Here's an actual picture of one of our hair snare stations. You can see the barbed wire here. This is our scent lure and 3 bags of donuts hanging from the wire across. This is our sample of hair that we found. Each time at each trap, you had to go around to each separate barb and check for hair. And if we had hair, we would take a sample, put it in a small manila envelope, then we would sanitize the wire or actually clean it free with a lighter, burn whatever remained on the barb, and we would have a fresh snare station. Basically, so the concept of our snare stations is the bears come through to get these donuts, they smell the raspberry extract, and as they walk through this trap, the barbed wire was about 3 feet off the ground. They walk over the barbed wire, the tufts in the barbed wire, or the barbs in the wire snag tufts of hair from the bear, and we can confirm the bear presence. The ultimate goal of the study was to collect enough hair to estimate a bear population. We were unable to do that, but we do have confirmed bear hair on our stations. So, our methods for our soft and hard mass studies. We obtained data from previous research from Womack and Carter in 2011. There were 43 plots from the Horse Block Mountain study area in the Talladega National Forest. And from each one, we figured the plant frequency and density, and we determined both of them for hard and soft mass species. These are just a list of the soft and hard mass species. In the soft mass, it's mostly your berry plants. You got 6 or 7 different species of blue and blackberries. That's your vacciniums. And your hard mass species is composed of mostly oak species. Your quercus, falcata, all the quercus are your oak species as well. So this is a list. This is actually every plant species that we studied in the entire research period. Our acorn production prediction models, we were able to use data from other previous research to determine the number of acorns produced by 5 separate species of oaks. The species included were Quercus coccinea, Quercus prentis, Quercus velutina, Quercus rubra, and Quercus alba. It's going to be your scarlet oak, white oak, black oak, northern red oak. And then we had acorns were collected. In their study, they collected acorns in circular traps that were randomly placed between tree crowns of 3 of each species of oak. And then the number of acorns produced was estimated by the acorns produced per meter squared of the crown of each tree. And then they based it on the average number of acorns per trap. Our results for our non-invasive sampling, our hair snares, like I said, they were unsuccessful in yielding enough hair to estimate a population size for our area. Out of 630 total hair snare stations over 3 study periods, we only had 1 confirmed hair sample from black bear. And the hair sample that we did find was located in the Duggar Mountain study site, and like I said earlier, it was the furthest distance from any human disturbance, and it was located by a small stream. These are the results from the plot frequency. These numbers, the higher the number, gives us the higher expected yield for each plant. As you can see, every plant studied was influential in some way, with your largest numbers coming from Quercus prentis and Diospyros virginiana. And it goes everywhere from a plot frequency of 1 all the way up to 174.5. With your plot frequency, the more frequent, the higher frequency of the species was estimated as a larger number of plants producing in that area. The trees and saplings for our hard mass species that we study. All right, your species in category 1 are trees, and the species in category 2 are saplings. And this is your woody stems per hectare. And what it is, this was our species density. So whenever you think of density, it's how much of one species is in one certain area. So if you have a larger number of species in one certain area, we were able to estimate that in that area there would be more yield produced. For our 5 species that we were able to actually estimate the number of acorns produced were black oak, chestnut oak, northern red oak, scarlet oak, and white oak. In the entire study area, we had a total number of trees. Where's my laser pointer? Right here. We had the number of acorns per tree. As you can see, the black oak, each black oak tree is estimated to produce 742 acorns, chestnut oaks 246, northern red oaks almost 1,500, scarlet oak 1,677, and the white oak was 1,884. And then we took all of the trees, the total number of trees, multiplied by the total number of acorns, and this gives us an estimate of exactly how many number of acorns were produced in our study area. So, our discussion for our non-invasive trapping, which was our hair snares. Hair snare placement is extremely key. I do believe that we could have went further into the woods, a little bit further away from human contact. I think that had a lot to do with it. So we planned our hair snare stations around the Pinhoti Trail. Basically, it was easier access for us because I think me and Dr. Carter are the only ones that can really experience it. And you really have to experience it to know when you're lugging 10 rolls of barbed wire around on each arm through briars and Chinese privet and all that good stuff. After a while, it gets tough to keep wandering through the woods. But for future studies, I would advise to just that it needs to be further away from human contact. Human traffic likely influenced the visiting bears that we had. Like I said, we located the study primarily based around the Pinhoti Trail. It's an extremely popular trail. People hike on it every weekend, every day. So that likely had a lot to do with it. And third of all, our bear population in northeast Alabama is just not dense enough to estimate our population size right now. We likely have 3 or 4 male bears wandering through the area. We don't have any known females producing cubs, so it's just extremely fragmented at this point in time. For our food productivity, we were able to determine that our soft and hard mass species produce foods, or they produce foods at separate times. Soft mass produce food in spring and summer, which is your berry plants, and your hard mass produce it in the fall and goes into the winter. And we were able to determine soft and hard mass food productivity for the bear habitat in the Shoal Creek Ranger District. The Talladega National Forest is present and at abundant numbers. So as I was saying earlier, and on the map, we saw where there was a lot of bear sightings up in the Little River Canyon. Well, why aren't they here? The Little River Canyon is a lot closer to the bear source, the Blue Ridge Mountains. Actually, the Little River Canyon National Park ties up to the state line. It's extremely close to Georgia, and on the other side, you actually have a national forest that's protected too, the Chattahoochee National Forest, and there's a lot less human disturbance in the Little River Canyon area. So the conclusion, Shoal Creek Ranger District of the Talladega National Forest yields adequate food supply for North American black bear. We know extirpation brought on by early agricultural practices due to hunting, poaching. They've made it difficult for black bear to thrive in northeast Alabama. But as bears continue to slowly grow and move back into the region, we have careful management. Black bear can reverse the effects of early farming and from early settlers and begin to prosper and grow in population numbers. Any questions? Anyone? Dr. Devereaux, I saw you first.
Okay. The hair snares, is that a standard way of doing a non-invasive testing?
It is. Other non-invasive methods such as game cameras can be used, but with hair snares, we actually modeled our study off of previous studies that we had found. It's the most common non-invasive method for bear population estimates.
So when other people do it, typically how much hair do they capture? And the reason I'm asking, if my hair got caught in one of those bars, it would take away more than 2 strands.
Yes, ma'am.
So I was just wondering how much hair typically gets caught.
It really just depends on how active the bear is around that area. You know, he could cross that trap, snatch up a couple of donuts and head on, and we only get two tufts of hair. Or
seems like if he touched it at all, it just seems, I would have expected that the tuft of hair would have been larger than what you showed us if he touched it up, if he or she touched it up.
Yes, ma'am. And that was just one picture of the hair. Now, there are in other samples where, you know, it fills the entire barb. I mean, it really just. We had one. We had the actual picture had like 3 pieces of hair in it. So more than likely, he brushed up against it. He probably didn't even go inside the trap.
So
he may have.
The only one you got.
That was the only one we got. Yes, ma'am.
And the reason I'm asking, the reason I asked, and I was a little disappointed that it didn't get that one with hair.
Yeah, we were disappointed too. We were.
Had a tougher hair. And
Yeah.
That's why I'm asking the question, if that was the best method to use to determine whether or not a bear fit in the hair.
From a non-invasive standpoint, it is. Other than game cameras, there's really not a lot that you can do other than relying on, you know, visual sightings. And then a lot of people, they see a big black dog running through the woods and they think it's a bear. So from a scientific standpoint, at this point in time, it's the best you can do. Yes, sir.
How confident are you that it was bear hair?
We are very confident that it was. We compared it visually to other bear hair samples. There have been black bear spotted in the Duggar Mountain area. The only other hair that we could assume that it would be, that we're assuming it could have been, would be feral pig. We did find some feral pig hair, but it's mostly gray. It's got a gray and black tint to it. And we had a hair sample from the Museum of Natural History that we were able to compare it to. So, yes, ma'am.
Why did you choose the Talladega National Forest to do your study as, and you may have said it, I didn't hear it, as opposed to the places where you knew that you could find it?
Well, now in Little River Canyon, the University of Auburn already has current bear studies going on up there. We did it for I'm from here. I graduated from Piedmont in 2006. I've lived here all my life, and I really wanted to do the bear population estimate for our area. It kind of hits home for me. Also, another reason for it being so close, it's inexpensive on travel. You know, I didn't have to take 2 days away from school to go check hair snare stations. It took me about half a day to go rebait them and check them. So if I was teaching labs or had class in the morning or evening, whichever it was, I could go for the other half a day and check my stations and then be back in time for school.
I'm really fascinated by these bears.
I was too. That's why, because my first semester here, I knew I wanted to be in grad school and I wanted to do wildlife, but I really didn't have a direction. And I got teamed up with Dr. Carter and we decided, hey, let's do some bear research. And here we are.
So when the Little River Canyon spottings, are they using hair snares up there too?
I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure. I think they do. I actually had coordinated to go up there with them one day, but our plans got switched up. As far as I know, they are. But we haven't been in a whole lot of contact with them with Auburn University. Dr. Carter has a good bit, but I haven't personally one-on-one been in contact with the people studying it. Yes, sir, Dr. Hamdani.
Yeah, how would you explain to me the conclusion from the Talladega National Forest yield an adequate food supply for the North American black bear? How do you come to this conclusion?
Basically, we came to the conclusion of, from seeing our densities, our plot frequencies and our densities, that the food supply is available. The adequate statement, that's more of a general, we didn't run any t-tests or plug in any formulas to generate a number for adequacy. I keep playing on this, I'm sorry. I need to put it down. But no, just based on the number of species available and the densities and frequencies of each one, we are estimating that we know the food supply is here. If each species produces the amount of yield it should in the habitat, then there will be ample amounts of food for bear to survive on, especially with the numbers that are moving through our area at low densities and low numbers of bear moving through.
We showed the relative frequency. The frequency was 174. How did you come to this number?
What we did for the plot frequencies was we added up the total number of plots that out of 43 plots, the total number of plots that the species was found in, and divided it by the total number of plots to get our plot frequency of how often it should occur. It's an average out of the 43. Yes, sir.
Along that same line, you were talking about the acorns produced per tree,
Yes, sir.
and when you mentioned the study that you were citing, you said that they did it based on tree canopy. When you did your multiplication, you looked like you were doing it just based on per tree.
What I did for whenever I didn't model it exactly after theirs. Whenever they did, it was Rose and et al. I can't remember everybody else in 2011. Their study, it was primarily on oak species producing acorns. And what I did was I took their numbers of how much each species, the white oak, the scarlet oak, and the northern oak, their final numbers of how much each tree should produce, and then we get our estimates from that. So we took the number of species, their average number that each species would produce, times the number of species that we found, and that gave us our total estimated number of acorns produced.
Okay, I didn't make the connection. When you mentioned the other study, you tied it to tree canopy. And
I'm sorry, I didn't make that clear.
That was all.
It's a complete, our acorn numbers are a complete estimation.
Can the bear live on just acorn or?
Now, in the fall and winter, their hard mass production, yes, sir. In the fall, because after the summer, it gets hot and dry, a lot less rain, the soft mass species quit producing, and that's whenever your acorn, oak species come into their prime, and that's their main food
They don't
source.
attack they don't attack deer or?
They don't, no, because they're a lot, now if there's a dead deer laying,
Yeah.
they'll scavenge on it, but as far as attacking a deer or attacking any other animal, they don't, because it's the slowest, one of the slowest animals in the forest. They have no adaptation of attacking, if that makes any sense. That they are carnivores, they will eat meat if it's readily available, but as far as chasing after deer or raccoons or anything of that nature, they don't. Yes, ma'am.
We can still teach you about these bears.
That's right.
So they are not intimidated by humans?
They are and they aren't. Where we live in small habitats, they're extremely intimidated. If you were to come up on a bear in the woods and it was just you and the bear, as soon as he saw you, he's going to hit the road and go the other way. Now, in larger, healthy populations, like in the Smoky Mountains, and even where I was in Arizona, it's kind of like, if you've ever been to Cades Cove up in Gatlinburg, the deer there, they'll come eat right out of your hand. Same concept. If there's a lot of bear in an area, they grow accustomed to humans being around. They know that humans are a food source, so they're going to come to that. The main problem is if you see a bear and he's coming at you, yeah, of course, run, but more times than not, he's going to run from you, unless you're in one of those areas, which we are not and probably won't be for a long time. So they are, but they aren't. It just depends on where you are.
I don't know whether these were bears or not, but last summer, I think it was, reportedly there were some sightings of bears, multiple bears, like I said, 3, in an urban area in Birmingham. Now, we didn't get pictures of them, somebody just
saw them.
Right, supposedly.
And it's very possible. It's extremely possible. More than likely or not, it was a male bear who's somehow wandered and got into Birmingham, and they're like a hound dog. Hound dogs follow their nose. Well, bears, they're going to follow a food source. If they're on a trail and the food just keeps coming, they're just going to keep walking and keep eating it, and they'll end up in your backyard before they realize it.
The trap you said is still there or you disassembled it?
No, it's still there. The reason we left it, future studies, we can do more future studies and save somebody else the hassle of setting up more traps, or they've already got 30 traps set up.
So the donut and the food you put never being touched?
What's that now?
The food you put for the bear, none of them being consumed?
Yeah, the food, it can be.
No, I mean...
None of it has.
Okay, that's...
It's still, as far as I know, it's still hanging there in a paper sack. And well, by now the rain's probably disintegrated the sack, or the raccoon. A lot of times raccoons, we had a big problem with raccoons. They'll climb out there on that wire and just take your sack and Gone.
Ruin the whole study.
Ruin everything.
They come and take your donuts.
They did. They did.
Took your donuts and they leave.
Didn't leave here. Well, raccoons will climb up the tree, out the wire, down the little rope, tear open the bag, the donut will fall on the ground, and then they'll just jump down and eat it and take away with it. Yes, sir.
Well, you mentioned about the traps. Did you ever find anything else? I know you said you only found one hair instead of a couple.
We got some feral pig hairs a few times on our lower traps that were about 2 to 3 feet. Typically, we try to do our traps about 4 feet off the ground because the only way you're going to get pig hair at 4 feet if it's a monster pig.
Okay.
And I would have liked to have found him because I would have hunted him.
I didn't know if you were, I didn't know if anything else was showing up on.
On our game cameras, we got a lot of squirrels and raccoons,
Okay.
but other than that, no.
Keep teaching me about the-
Come on with it.
This is not the research part, this is some of the biology over there. And I'm back to the reproduction. You said they only carry their young for 2 months. It takes 5, because when you say 5 months to
Yeah.
plant the egg, I perceive it still is just at an egg stage.
It is. Whenever they reproduce and the male implants into the female, that egg actually hangs on inside of there for 5 months because they reproduce, they mate during the summer months. Well, if it comes to the fall, say it's a bad fall for a bad production season for the fall and the female hasn't got enough carbohydrates and fats built up to carry out the pregnancy, then the body can flush that out of her system and she never has a pregnancy. But 5 months after they mate, if she has consumed enough food, she is healthy enough, and she can survive through the winter, then that egg implants, and then it takes about 2 or 3 months, and they're born. Mm-hmm.
A whole bear.
A whole bear.
A whole bear has developed in 15 months.
Yes, ma'am.
Wow. That's amazing. That's vast.
Anyone else?
No more questions?
All right, I'd like to say a special thank you then. Let me get to the end of this. Oh, man. All right, I'll just go with it.
I got 5 on the.
It's still on the screens, and I don't need it anyway. I know who. Dr. Carter, I want to say, gosh, thank you so much for. It was really a blessing to come to JSU and live at home and work with you and the biology program at Jacksonville State University. Thank you for that. Another big thank you goes to Mr. Kirby Bristow with the Arizona Game and Fish Department. I had an amazing internship last summer. I got to learn a lot, experienced a lot of hands-on stuff for studying black bear. And amazingly enough, I got to have a little input on their study as well. My mom and dad, Billy and Renee Seals, thank y'all so much. They supported me through everything I've ever wanted to do. Without any questions whatsoever. They just said, go for it. You've got my full support. And it's been amazing. Thank you. Dr. Murdoch, Dr. Triplett, thank you so much for your support and input on everything as well. Dr. Mead, also, I appreciate your support the entire time. My fiance, Lindsay Bell, she don't like me to call her out, but I am. She's been right there with me the whole time. I got her to go out a couple of times and check some traps with me. Actually, she went once because I think she didn't want any more after that. And everybody else for being here, the biology program. Miss Joan, thank you for letting me be a GA. It was an amazing experience, fulfilling. Dr. Hamdani, it was a blast. Thank you, Dr. Klein, Dr. Rayburn. Thank y'all. I don't think Dr. Klein's in here. But Dr. Rayburn, thank you for all of your insight as well. Dr. Blair, gosh, I remember the first day whenever I showed up at your office because I hadn't heard from JSU in like 2 months, and I'm wondering if I'm going to get into a grad program. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for your support. And Daniel Wright, too.